enjoy spending time with. He's come a long way from the Motor City, which is Detroit, Michigan. And I visited him there. He's been a gracious host and a friend of INSZoom for many years. Thank you. You might want to go by and he's got some publications and other things that his firm has developed that would be helpful in using resources, having some resources available for additional enrichment after the conference. Merlin Kapulu is here from Cognizant. He has been in immigration for, I believe, at least 16 years, maybe more. More? We don't want to age him too much, that could be embarrassing. But long enough to know that he is a legend in this room. I'm sure many of you know he's had great accomplishments. Since 2006 with Cognizant and the previous 12 years with INSZoom. Understands the risks and liabilities involved with compliance, audits, and all of the issues that we're concerned with today. Looking forward to hearing from him. Also on the panel, Stephanie, forgive my pronunciation, maybe you can make it simple. Shakerman. Well, that's much easier than it looks. Comes from the Midwest as well, like Rami from Dayton, Ohio. Has studied business administration and computer science. Has spent the first 25 years of her career in IT with companies like NCR and IBM. She moved to Europe in 1989 with IBM and spent 7 years as a project office management consultant in Eastern Europe. She switched tracks to immigration when she joined the Frankfurt International Airport in the year 2000. 2005, she joined the U.S. Foreign Service as a consular officer in Frankfurt, Germany, and later Chennai, India. This year, in August, she joined Wipro Technologies as their head of overseas operations for the Americas. Again, we look forward to hearing from Stephanie. Excuse me. Excellent. Stella, welcome. Stella is another senior executive, a vice president at INSZoom, which is an HP company. An MBA, brings immense knowledge with over 16 years in global immigration and travel. She's been also associated with companies like Del Perot Systems, heading immigration services for India and the APAC countries. She's also worked with other companies, Accenture and TCS, prior to Del Perot. You can see she has extensive knowledge. She's also traveled immensely and has shared immigration best practice and compliance at other conferences for people interested in global immigration. She'll be talking to us today, giving us the benefit of her experience and knowledge. Finally, Kiran. From INSZoom as well. 12 years in the industry. Manages immigration for the Americas and APAC geographies. 7 years at INSZoom, holds a bachelor's degree in engineering, and is the lead in the immigration practice currently at INSZoom. So, wealth of knowledge. I'd like to introduce Rami here. He's gonna provide us a kickoff here, and then we'll hear from each panelist.
Thank you, Jake. Thank you for being here this afternoon. This panel will address enforcement and site visits. As most of you know, USCIS has really increased the level of investigators, auditors, as has ICE, I believe State Department, Labor as well. And I think it's very critical, more than ever, to make sure that your company is providing accurate information, is implementing training to make sure that the people that are running your immigration regime are well informed. You also need to communicate very carefully with all of your employees. There are some things that technology can do and make efficient, and that's wonderful because it'll save you a lot more time so that you can focus on making sure that this person is really going for training, that there's no money exchange or whatever the case may be. So a lot more personal interaction is also required. It's not just a matter of, putting in papers and filing them. You have to make sure that you know what your employees are doing, and your employees need to know what your policies are. It's very important. So, before, in the old days, you'd file a case, and you'd get an approval, and then the person would come in on an H or L, and things have changed. Now, the requirements to get an approval are substantially greater. A lot of people know that the L1 visa has been severely restricted, as has now the H1B visa. And it's very important to meet the criteria set out by USCIS and to make sure that you continuously comply. So it's not just a matter of obtaining an approval and putting someone in a location or a project or in-house, whatever the case may be. You have to monitor that individual's activities and their duties and make sure that if there are any material changes, there has to be an amendment. If they move to another location, there are certain obligations of the employer. And these are all very critical because FTNS has announced 25,000 plus visits. That's besides ICE, that's besides some of the other enforcement agencies that may run into your respective corporations. So it's very critical that you are completely transparent and completely, you have complete bona fide processes, documents, etc. And more importantly, or I should say, actually just as important, the continuous monitoring of compliance. If there are any changes, you have to take the proper steps, whether it's filing a new LCA or amending a petition, or if a purpose for the consulate, if you represent something and something changes, I think it's good, that's a good idea, it's a good practice to convey, look, something legitimately changed, and as such, we're going to do X, Y, Z. So at the end of the day, establishing trust and reputation is very critical. Can you hear me in the back? Okay. I wanted to just quickly mention the Broadgate case that was brought by an industry organization that challenged the UFIL memo. For us attorneys, unfortunately, it was dismissed with prejudice, and more or less, this memo really tightens the criteria for the adjudicators at USCIS. Even though it's not technically law, it is a training document, and it really will dictate the outcome in the adjudication of cases. Of course, the CBP and the State Department also have their respective regulations and interpretations. So at the end of the day, you have to basically look at, okay, we'll get an approval from USCIS. However, you also have to pass and convince the consulate, and as well, go get through CBP. And each one of them has their own independent authorities. And just because one or two say okay doesn't mean that the third one or one of them is going to come back. And more importantly, is once the person enters the country, do not be surprised if you have FTNS or possibly ICE that will drop by to make sure that everything you represented to the government and to the respective agencies is accurate. So that requires an infrastructure. That requires constant communication. And in this world of instant movement and the business constraints and pressures that we have, it's again very critical to set a very high tone of ethics